Welcome to the Falling Off the Floor podcast. I'm your host, Austin Becker, and this is your home for adventure, travel, addiction, recovery, the outdoor and ski industry, and of course, redemption. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Falling Off the Floor podcast. This week we have a special guest, Chris Thompson. He is a content creator, life coach that has been in the game for a while now.
Long time.
So, Chris, tell us your page on Instagram, SupDaily. From what I can see and what I've consumed your media for a long time now. What is your message? What is your approach with content these days that has really helped you build an audience?
Yeah, it's shifted pretty majorly recently because I had to change for myself. I would often think, I would get an idea and my first thought was, will people like this? Not, will I enjoy making this?
Yeah.
Look, there's going to be an aspect of making content where you have to think about that.
Yeah.
But when I'm working with clients doing social media stuff, I'm telling them, you have to love what you make because you have to make it a lot.
Yeah.
And then if you don't like what you're doing, you won't want to repeat it. And then you'll build an audience of people that you don't connect with. So it's like, I got to a point where I was like, okay, what do I want to make? What can I contribute? And so I just started talking about mental health and just life in general. And I think people really seek genuine connection with people. So there's not a whole, I also don't know how to edit that well. So it makes it easier to not zhuzh it up, so to speak.
Yeah. So we were talking a little bit before the podcast. You came into content creation almost by accident.
Yes.
And it started in the world of YouTube, you said 18 years ago?
When you say it, it sounds... yeah, my channel would be going to college now.
Wow.
Which is weird to think. But yeah, it was 2006. I had a video of my dad and I doing Dance Dance Revolution, which, by the way, not dancers. So it wasn't impressive. I actually wanted my friend to take a picture. I was like, just take a... So the video was literally 11 seconds of me going, did you take a picture? My friend goes, no. Go take a picture. I thought this was brilliant content that MySpace needed to see.
Yeah.
So I thought YouTube was this place to privately store videos so that you can post it somewhere else. And so I posted it to MySpace, 2006. And but then I started getting notifications that I was getting like comments, subscribers. I was like, what is this? And then I saw people talking to a camera. The word vlog didn't exist yet, so I didn't know it was vlogging. I was like, why are these people talking to a camera? That's weird. Not 18 years later.
Yeah.
I'm still yapping on the internet.
Yeah. So your page, SupDaily, it's a lot of inspirational content, and you talk a lot about mental health, and that's how I connected to you. I'm pretty involved in the world of mental health and addiction in particular.
Yeah.
Where did you get this inspiration to start making content about mental health?
I was working on my mental health, and I figured if I'm doing it, might as well just share it, and especially I wanted to inspire men. I did. I think therapy is hard in general. I think it's hard to work on yourself. My therapist put it to me this way. He's like, when I go to the gym's usually half empty, and I look across the street and there's a Dairy Queen and there's a line out. He goes, a lot of people are Dairy Queen. And it's not a judgment of them. It's a lot easier to do what's easy than to work on yourself because the process is painful. So I figured it started off with me I would get done with the session, and I started with EMDR, which was a more like intense trauma-based modality of therapy. And I would just get done and I would decompress on camera. I would just start sharing what I had learned, and people connected with it. And it's just what I like talking about.
Yeah. I love talking about it as well.
Yeah. I can tell by your hat.
Yeah, exactly. This is actually a buddy of mine, Drew Peterson. He just came out with a film, Feel It All. It's about his journey through severe mental health issues and made a film about coming out of a place of attempting suicide to then running the Leadville 100 and going back and skiing every peak along the Leadville 100. And then he made these hats. I give a fuck about mental health.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool.
It's clear what it's about.
It was funny. I was at Trader Joe's the other day and I'm checking out, and the cashier's like looking at me like very odd, and I'm like, do I have something on my shirt? Like, what's going on? And he's like, wow, that's really bold. And I was like, what? And he looks away for a second, he looks back, and he's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I thought your hat said, I don't give a fuck about mental health.
And you know what? You're entitled to that. But I agree, it is a bold statement.
Yeah.
If you don't care, why are you wearing the hat?
Yeah, exactly. And it was really funny because he was like so embarrassed, and I was like, dude, it's totally fine. But he's sitting there like thinking to himself, wow, this guy's a total asshole.
Well, I try not to judge because you don't know how someone got to that point.
Yeah.
You know, if you get to the point of wearing a hat that says I don't give a fuck about mental health, chances are something happened. So trying to meet people where they are and with compassion in that moment is usually where, because sometimes you find out a story, you're like, oh, now I'm the asshole.
Yeah.
You know, so I just, all right.
Yeah.
Do you.
You do you. So where do you see your world of mental health evolving? Do you have any thoughts of taking it to the next level, coaching in mental health, being a therapist, anything like that?
Well, I mean, I think being a therapist would be great. It's just schooling is immensely expensive, you know, so that's just not in the books for me right now. So doing the life coaching stuff, you know, I am clear when I'm working with clients, like I'm not a therapist. If you come to me and say I'm depressed, that's not what I do, but I can help you with some of the mindsets that block you from reaching your next goal. So I'm doing that, and it just kind of naturally dovetailed into social media coaching too. I don't know that I've thought about a bigger picture. I just want to talk about the things that I want to talk about and help people and challenge ideas and stuff like that. Like I want to disrupt people's mindsets for a moment so that they can think outside, because I think right now, especially with social media, it's very easy to insulate yourself into one certain mindset. And so of course when you hear something that's outside of that, it's shocking.
For sure.
You know, and it makes you upset. So I started a newsletter actually called Unfiltered Friends, and I talk about personal development stuff. And I've created, instead of like trying to like be in those spaces where, you know, you can get into some trouble, I found a space where people know why they're there, they're ready to be challenged, they're ready to challenge me, and we can all grow together.
That's awesome. I didn't know you had this newsletter, and
yeah.
I definitely am going to subscribe now.
Yeah, it's over the last year I just started writing, and I really fell in love with writing, so I could write a book. I don't know, like I'm just kind of like, I'm trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up still. But I asked my dad, I was like, when do I start feeling like an adult? He was like, if you feel like an adult, you will pass me. He just turned 70 today. Happy birthday, Dad. And so I'm just going to follow his lead.
Yeah, I feel that often. I'm in this space right now of like major imposter syndrome, which is it's an interesting place for me. So I can't talk a lot about it, but we're doing a film, and we just brought on like a production agency in Hollywood, and we're talking like sets and crews and all these things that are, I feel almost every day when I'm like in these meetings with these guys, I'm like, well, what am I doing here? And I have a perspective for the film, and that's why I came on board. You know, it was my idea for the film. I spoke at the Winter Park Film Festival and just met the right people at the right time, and it opened these doors for me that I was like, wow, this idea for this film can actually, like, this can go somewhere.
Yeah.
And when I pitched the idea to these guys that do have a ton of experience in this industry, I realized, oh man, like there are people that give a fuck about mental health.
Yes.
And there are people that want to help bring this vision to life. So sitting in that place of imposter syndrome has been interesting for me. And, I've worked with my own therapist to, get through these thoughts that I have in my head. What has that been like for you as you've grown a following, you've gained a lot of attention? What has that feeling been like coming from, you made a joke earlier before the podcast about being a janitor to where you are now. How has that evolved for you?
Well, to be clear, I was a janitor, but the joke was, I didn't, for some reason, I wanted to make my job seem cooler. So there was two. It was custodial engineer and janitorial executive.
Nice.
What I've realized after doing this for so long is people don't care if you don't think you belong there. People want to be entertained or connect with somebody. So just do it. Just do that part.
Yeah.
And if you get to your point, where you are having people invest money and their time into that, are those people idiots?
No.
Do they know what they're doing?
Yeah.
Would they spend money on something they didn't believe in?
No.
So what's the issue?
Wow. I needed that.
It's hard though, because the older I get and I start thinking about what I thought about the adults that were my age.
Yep.
I'm just like, oh, nobody knows what's going on. They're just doing their best every day.
Yeah.
So as long as you keep trudging forward, let other people tell you no. Don't pre-reject yourself.
Yeah. I think over the last few years I've gotten to that point where it's like I do belong, and then things like this come up, a film or something that I'm working on, and I'm like, whoa, like where do I fit into this?
Yeah.
And it's an interesting space to be in.
It is.
Because I trained myself for so many years being a drug addict, living on the streets, all these different things that I didn't belong anywhere.
Yes.
And that my path in the world was always going to be that I was going to be the guy on the side of the street doing drugs, and I wasn't going to get better, and my self-confidence tanked. And getting out of that space took a lot of personal work.
Yeah.
And that's why I connected with content like yours so much, because there is a large population on this planet that has no way to connect to a therapist. They don't have the resources, and having a space that you're able to get on social media and see a guy like yourself that they believe in and think, oh man, this little 15-second clip could make or break someone's day.
You just never know. I mean, the homelessness thing. I was also homeless at one point. When I was in Los Angeles, I was homeless on the street, homeless, and then I had a second round where I was couch surfing for like 8 months, just trying to figure out what I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people are afraid to take a leap because there's that mindset that you're gonna end up back there. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but like I'm like, if this doesn't happen, if I fail at this, well, I'm gonna be back on the street, and it's not logical. It's like a fear-based thing. So that's why I just look at myself and I was like, do it scared. What are you gonna do? Like, do it. If you don't do it, it's 100% sure nothing will happen. Yeah. Do it scared, and you might find out that what you were afraid of wasn't really, you built it up into a monster that it wasn't, So it's again like not allowing that mindset to stop you from trying. Like, I've tried so many different types of content because that's what was relevant to me at the time.
Yeah.
And branding is wonderful, polish is wonderful, but if you don't have the connection with the people who watch you and you don't give them somewhere where they can connect.
I think being in that, I've been in your shoes. I've lived through that, and that feeling in the moment that I'm just going to take the job that I don't want to take. I'm just going to do the thing I don't want to do so I can get out of this place. For me, came out of fear that I was going to end up back on the streets, back doing what I was before. And what I'm doing now, I think was the biggest leap I've taken like in my sobriety. I was really comfortable. I found a really good niche. I had all the connections in the world in the mental health and addiction space, and I was comfortable. I had a salary.
Yep.
I had health insurance.
Comfort gets you every time, man.
Yeah.
But things don't grow in comfort.
No, they don't. And as my therapist back in Maine, where I got sober, who I was lucky enough to be able to interview last week, I went back to Maine and had him on the podcast. He would always tell me, you better get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Oh, that's the worst. No, I want everything to be. I'm like, I know it's weird to say it because you and I are just meeting now, but like, I'm really proud of you, brother. That's a lot of hard work, even just the mental health part of it, but also the addiction part of it. Like the fact that you are where you are now. Like, do you ever just zoom out?
That's my biggest issue in life.
Zoom out, brother. Think about where you were, 7 years ago.
Yeah.
And think about what that person would think about what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
Come on. But we're so focused on like the micro that if we just sit back, like, sometimes I'm down on myself, but this is what I do for a living.
Yeah.
And I made it all up. All this stuff, I made it all up. The content is just off the top of my head. I decided I was going that direction, and that's what everybody's doing. But everyone thinks that everyone has this like master plan, and it's not always the case. And like, actually, going back to something you were talking about earlier about feeling like you weren't sure where you belong or whatever.
Yeah.
This is a lesson from my therapist. It's great. It's stuck with me. Because I was like, I feel like I can exist in a lot of spaces, but I don't belong in any of those spaces. He's like, because, I've done a lot of advocacy, and it's not lost on me that I'm one of the least oppressed groups on the planet, Yeah. So I was able to be amongst those groups, but I always felt like I could only sit on the porch. I couldn't go in because I was not part of that experientially, the struggles that those people were experiencing.
Yeah.
He's like, well, how about instead of trying to figure out where you are going to be, just make your own place and draw those people in. This is an opportunity for you to lead instead of figure out where you can fit in.
I love that.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that. I think I find myself in these places quite often where I'm trying to fit in other circles.
Mm-hmm.
I came into this content world. I'm trying to fit in with what's trending, with what's happening in the world. And the second that I created something similar to what you were talking about, like my podcast, my content, everything that I'm doing is really going against the grain. Like,
How so?
in a lot of ways, the things that I talk about are not the popular thing to talk about.
Right. Which means it's needed.
And the funny thing is, I was just telling my buddy this the other day, the most popular episode of this podcast is an episode titled Austin crashes his car into a church.
And people are probably like, how do I watch that on audio?
Excuse me.
You all right?
I've been sick for 2 months now. I got COVID in Europe, and it's
I got
like,
COVID in Australia. We should just never leave our houses. That's the solution.
I think the things that I talk about connect with people, and maybe they wouldn't go out in public and be like, oh man, I like really connected with that podcast episode where Austin talked about crashing his car into a church, because they feel that's like an embarrassing thing to talk about, or it's like bad for business. And I feel like it's great for my business.
It's what you wanted to talk, like, you just never know who you're going to reach or how you're going to reach them. Like, I have a TED Talk called Influencer is a Verb. And I'm trying to, I was trying to guide mostly young people, because for the last 8-9 years, the number one answer for what elementary school kids and middle school kids want to be when they grow up is a YouTuber. Not wild, not fireman, not astronaut, YouTuber. But I see them kind of chasing trends, and they're forgetting the internet is forever.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to move them in a direction that will be where they're making content that touches the world in a positive way. And I always say, your channel is you're a radio station, and you're broadcasting, and you don't know who you're going to reach.
Yeah.
Because 2% of the internet is us, content creators.
Yep.
8% are people who engage with content, which means 90% are lurkers.
Yeah.
People who don't interact whatsoever. And you never know how your messages are hitting them. So there's one story where I made a video every day on YouTube for 6 years.
Wow.
Not highly edited, one take video. And there was one video where I was going to miss the streak, so I just whipped out my phone and I made a video talking about, like, there's nothing wrong with you. And it was more so about relationships. Then about 5 years later, I got contacted by a guy in my Twitch community because I was doing live streaming stuff. He was like, I'm going to be in Chicago. Can I come have pizza with you? Because I love Chicago style pizza. And he was like, I want to tell you something. I was like, what? He goes, do you know how I found your content? I was like, no. He's like, I was in a hotel by myself. I had clothes laid out. I had the chemicals ready to go. And I was at the end of a 6-month plan to end my life. Notes written to everybody. And I was trying to Google how to make sure my body went to a morgue instead of being autopsied. And somehow, algorithmically, my video popped up, and just the title, There's Nothing Wrong With You, he's like, I decided I wanted to live. And now he's happily married, and he's got a great job, and that's why I tell people, it's like, you just never know at what point in time you're going to reach somebody.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it important.
That is incredible.
Oh, it's just, I'm eating pizza and just sobbing on the pizza.
Those are the type of things that I feel like when I, let's say, release a podcast episode, those are the type of things that we hope for. I spoke on a panel at the Winter Park Film Festival, and we were talking about that exact thing. If we make film in the world of mental health, if we're creating a podcast, we never truly know how people are going to react, how it's going to hit the world. It's really like throwing a fishing line into this lake behind us, and like, we don't know what's going to bite it, but occasionally the fish are going to swarm it.
Yeah.
And whether that's the algorithm, whether that's we created content that connected with a group of people, I feel like the world of social media is very hard. I feel like I have clients come to me all the time that say, well, we want you to manage our social media and do all of our creative work for the social media. How many sales is this going to bring us, and how many followers am I going to have in 5 months? And it's like,
what? I don't know. like I know what I'm doing when it comes to helping people grow a channel.
Yeah.
But I'm still an educated guesser.
Yeah.
You know,
for sure.
Like, you're doing your best with the knowledge that you have. I have more knowledge than most people, so people come to me.
Yeah.
But nobody, whenever I get cast for like a viral video, I was like, really? You know it's going to go viral already. You should write a book, because nobody knows when something's going to go viral.
Exactly.
You know, or how it's going to go viral too, because it could go viral for wrong reasons, you know, or bad reasons. So,
yeah, social media is this world that it's never going to go away. And I tell clients this all the time in more of the professional aspect of it, you know, creating ad content, stuff like that from our marketing agency. I tell clients all the time, it's not really going to go away. It's the same thing I say about AI. So instead of pushing against it, you actually have to kind of lean into it to be successful.
Yeah, that's what happened when YouTube first started. Like, I would want my actor friends to be in my content, and they were like, ugh, no, I don't even know what that is. Yeah. And then, you know, fast forward a couple years, YouTube becomes this juggernaut, and they're like, can I be in your content? And I was like, I don't know, you know? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And then also, there's free tools. Like, those are free tools. I was like, and I'm going to book something over someone who might be more talented than me just because I have a bigger social following. So imagine if you had more talent and you had a social media following, you know, why not use all the tools that you got out there?
Yeah. So what's your backstory? Where did Chris come from? What's your family history? Where are you from originally?
Well, when a mommy and daddy love each other very much. I moved a lot as a kid. I was born in Indiana, then we moved to Illinois, then moved back to Indiana, then moved out to New Jersey, then moved back to Illinois, and then when I was in college, I got scouted. Now, mind you, I'm 42, so like this was like 2000, so tail end of the boy band time. I got scooped up by a brand new boy band that was starting, and I quit college.
Wow.
I was gonna be a choir teacher.
Nice.
And then I went for the boy band thing, and that was when I learned that the industry is fickle, and so that didn't end up working out.
Yeah.
And so I was just like drinking and waiting tables, and I just kind of woke up one day. I was like, I used to be more ambitious than this.
Yeah.
And I just moved to LA. I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
I saved up $5,000. I was like, oh, this will last me. I'd never lived on my own before. That lasted not very long, especially in Los Angeles. And I feel like I've just failed up ever since.
Yeah.
You know,
I love that term.
You just fail up, you know, like the people who are the most successful tend to not, it's not necessarily that they're most talented, it's that they don't quit. So I just kind of kept going with what made sense at that time. It's caused me to be a little scattered, but then I found out this year that I have ADHD and have had my whole life, so that's fun. So that makes a lot of sense, but that knowledge has helped me kind of step back and look at my behaviors. And so I was a singer, I was doing sketches, and I was just kind of like throwing darts at a board and seeing what stuck. And I think people just connected with me. I attracted a certain type of person, and I made sure to invest in those people, because I think a lot of people are thinking constantly about how do I get more people instead of how do I develop the relationship with the people that I have so they stay. And I know them and they know me. And so I have people who've been following me for 16 years that are still around, you know, forging. My purpose was always connection and validation of the way people think. Sometimes I'll talk about something that doesn't necessarily hit as hard as I'm making it sound like for me, but I want to give someone an opportunity to be like, oh my God, I'm not alone in that.
Yeah.
And that has bonded me with so many wonderful people over the years.
Yeah, I think that's such an important thing in terms of building an audience is connection. I think a lot of people in our space chase trends and the viral, and that's a one-off thing. Like building an audience takes time, especially an authentic one. And I have noticed I built, a bit of a following, and it came, some of it came from a viral video, but the consistency of just being my authentic self. A creator, and I can't think of his name, posted this video the other day, and he was, the title was essentially like the algorithm's changing, and it's not chasing after the best hook, chasing after the viral hook, the viral sound. It was being your authentic self. And I think it worked for a while that people could be unauthentic and chase trends, and they built a following. But then a couple months go by and that person's like, wait, I'm not getting anything from Austin's content. I'm not getting anything from Chris's content. It's just chasing trends. And I think that's something that you've done really well. Like, you look at your SupDaily page. I was, going through it yesterday, just trying to find out more about you. And it's literally you holding a phone in front of you. There's nothing crazy unique about holding the phone. No. But what's unique is what you're saying and being your authentic self and giving value. Yeah. And I think that term value is probably the most important thing in the world of social media. Is it's got to be funny. It's got to give, there's all these different things that can give value. A lot of people follow pages because they're funny. Other people follow pages because they feel seen or heard. people follow pages because they think that their skiing's badass. Whatever it may be, you have to give your audience value.
Yeah.
And I think you and I are on a similar wavelength in that we're trying to give our audience value through hope and being seen and heard and understood. Because in this world that we're living in, we're sitting here in a park and there's so many different things happening.
Yes.
There's guys over here filming content for it looks like some football, skit. And
This girl's been walking around back and forth for at least an hour.
yeah. And all these people are living these individual lives that are happening on this spinning circle around us.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're recording right now might connect with 50% of the people or 10% of the people. We don't really know. And I try and give value from prior experience. Like you said, failing up.
Fail up.
I've built my following around being lighthearted around the crazy shit that I used to do.
Yeah.
Like, insane.
But when you've gone through stuff like that, you tend to have dark humor or like kind of morbid humor because that's a coping mechanism.
Oh, for sure. Like, it is how I cope. I think for a long time I was stuck in that mindset of, oh my God, everyone's just going to think I'm crazy. And there is, I'll get the occasional comment that fits into the word that I don't really love, but like stigma, where people are like, just get a real job. Like, you're,
What is a real job? Like, where I work for someone that I don't enjoy in a place that I don't enjoy with hours I don't enjoy. Like,
Yeah.
I would rather have the possibility of doing something like this on a Wednesday than being under fluorescent lights in a cubicle. Like, that's just, I've never had a regular job, like a corporate job or anything like that. I was a bouncer and then I was a content creator. So
and a janitor.
Oh, I've had so many different types of jobs. I was a truck driver.
Oh, nice.
I was a factory worker at Caterpillar. Like, I've had all sorts of jobs, but none of them were traditional because the idea of sitting like that, maybe it's the ADHD thing, I don't know. Like, just sitting there, just numb my brain, and you got to believe in yourself to take the leap, to give it a shot, Like, you're never going to know until you try. You miss 100% of the shots you never take. Wayne Gretzky, Michael Scott,
Yeah. Wayne Gretzky, Michael Scott. Love it.
Got to make office references. I'm a millennial.
Yeah, I find myself in this world of content. We were talking about before, like TikTok, being this space where a lot of people built a following around content that I don't even think gives value.
Look, there's times for moving your mind in a certain direction, and there's time for bed rot scrolling, okay?
Yeah.
Everywhere has its place to be, and it's just not for me.
Yeah. Not for me either, but you built a massive following.
Yeah, which is crazy. I mean, and that's something to speak to your imposter syndrome too. It's like, do you think, I saw your page has like, 11, 12,000 followers, stuff like, do you think 12,000 people were just like, this guy's an idiot, I'm going to follow him? Maybe some did, but like in a fun way,
Yeah, for sure.
But like, all those people don't follow you because you're not doing something that's worth following.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's something that helps my imposter syndrome at times. I think at times a lot of comparing happens. Comparing is another one of my character flaws, that I find myself in this place of, oh, I was just a junkie and I only have 11,000 followers and you have this many and she has this many, and you look at this world of content and you again step back and you think, oh man, what am I doing? Like, I'm gonna go take the comfortable route and get a comfy job.
Yeah, the comparison thing is I struggle with it too. You're like, why would, like, especially with the singing stuff, because I used to do it all the time, and then when it became my job, and like that was what I was doing on YouTube for a long time. I was like, well, and now I look at how much talent is out there. I was like, well, why would I sing if that person's singing? Well, I'm going to sing because it brings me joy.
Yeah.
People want to watch other people experiencing joy.
Yeah.
You know, so maybe you're not the best at that, but you're the only you doing it.
Yep.
So just do it and let the people decide what they like.
Yeah.
And if you compare yourself, instead of comparing whether you're as good as that person, look at what that person is doing. It's like, how can I take some of the success this person is having and apply it to what I'm doing?
Yeah.
You know, it's a collaborative thing instead of a competition thing.
Yep.
And that's usually been helpful to try and quell that part of my brain that's like, you're bad and you should stop. And it's like, well, no, I shouldn't stop if that's not what I want to do. You know?
Yeah. I've leaned into that. I've leaned into, and this has taken time. I got laid off from my job a little over a year ago, like a year and like a week ago. And this has really been a year of, I made the decision when I got laid off that I was like, I'm not going to subscribe to the 9-to-5 anymore. And I liked what I was doing, being able to help people in the world of like mental health and addiction and treatment, and it was cool to have that one-on-one approach, but it was draining. Totally draining, and sitting down across from someone and listening to what they're going through every single day was a lot. And I tell my therapist that all the time. I'm like, God, the shit you listen to that I give. Like,
but they're trained for that.
Yeah.
They're trained not to sponge.
Yeah. And I was definitely not trained to sponge. And I found myself a lot of times, the 5 o'clock bell rings and I leave work and I'm thinking about it until my head hits the pillow.
Yeah.
And there's never turning it off. There's never a moment that I would second guess myself. Oh, I should have said that to him because maybe it would have had this effect. So I've leaned into this for the last year, and I've built a little bit of a following. I started this podcast because the podcast was actually a weird thing. I always knew in the back of my head that I wanted to talk about this somewhere, so I started with content. I started talking about it in the video form through short form content, and a lot of people around me, all my closest friends were like, you've got to do stand-up comedy. Like, because I would tell these stories, driving my car into a church. I would tell these stories, and everyone around me is like, you need to go to this open mic. And I'd get, somebody would send me a reel on Instagram, like, there's an open mic at so-and-so in downtown Denver. You've got to go do this. And I'm like, no, but like, that's not the way that I wanted to portray the message that I was trying to get across. And, like we were just talking about, that having that lighthearted manner and self-deprecation about my past stories, you say that in front of a group of people, sitting around a campfire, and I'm telling the story.
There's a difference between conversational funny and I paid money, you're on stage, be funny.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
it's a loving thing that they're saying, but the comedy industry is very different than...
For sure. And that's where the idea for the podcast came from. I felt, okay, everyone has this idea that I can be good talking and I can stand in front of a camera. I was a childhood actor in LA, and I saw that world from like age 6 to like 14 which is also a really weird industry. Like,
it's very weird.
The childhood acting world is
it's just not good. It's just not good for kids' brains.
No, and I make the joke all the time, like, I'm the typical Disney star turned drug addict.
But there has to be a reason.
Oh my God, yeah. Like, you look at all the Disney stars, they all end up like me. Like,
do you have a hypothesis as to why that happens?
I think I've given this a lot of thought, and I actually haven't talked about it on the podcast at all. I don't even know. Well, actually, my producer, Naveed, definitely has brought up the fact I was a childhood actor, because I don't really like talking about it.
What were you on? Would I know what you were on?
No, I wasn't really TV shows. I was like commercial based. So
that's money though.
yeah. It. I also make the joke. It paid for the drugs and the needles to get in my arm, and then it paid for rehab. So luckily, I still had money left over for rehab, which was good.
So what causes so many to go in that direction?
The thing that I have come up with in my head, and I don't know if everyone's experiencing this. I haven't talked to a lot of childhood actors. There's this pressure that's put on kids from a very young age. I think while I was trying to be a kid, I'm getting pulled out of school almost every single day. I lived in Lake Arrowhead, California, Big Bear area.
Yeah, that's not close to LA.
Yeah, which is an hour and 45 minutes from LA without traffic.
Which doesn't exist.
Which doesn't exist. So on a Tuesday afternoon, agent would call my mom. Mom would pull me out of school at noon. We'd drive to LA. During the day, not as bad traffic, takes 2 hours. You get there, you audition. 4.5, 5 hour drive home. And this was 3, sometimes 4 times a week. So while I'm trying to be a kid and be at recess with my friends, it's like, oh, you got an audition, let's go.
Yeah.
And I think there's this pressure from a young age that kids at 8 or 9 years old shouldn't feel pressure, really. You know, you're like a commodity instead of a person. Exactly.
Yeah.
And there was this pressure of like performing, and the weird thing is like being tailored. Like you have to look this certain way. So it created this ideology in my head of like body image. And since I was a kid, I have dealt with my weight going up and down. I've always called my weight the stock market. Like it just goes up and it goes down. And the weird thing is, I get paid to ski, and people look at me and they're like, wait, you're a professional athlete? Because at times I've gained weight, and they're like, wait, you get paid to ski? Like you don't look like
as
an
if
athlete.
People who have gained weight don't have the capacity to be elite at something. Like,
yeah,
it's a mindset thing. It's a weird mindset thing that some people have.
For sure. And I think that pressure from a young age, where I came in as a kid, where you walk in to an audition and you stand in front of a camera, do your sides. So you turn sideways and they see the side of your face, the front of your face. Do your slates. And then what's your weight? How tall are you? What's your skin color? What's your hair color? What sort of clothes are you wearing that day?
It's like escapism then.
It's escapism.
Yeah.
And I would sit in front of these cameras with these like old men and women that are looking at like an 8 or 9 year old kid like, oh, you're not skinny enough. Or the role is, you're not fat enough. And
or there's the dead silence.
Yeah.
They just sit there. I remember I did a commercial audition when I was in LA, and they're just sitting in a room far away from you.
Yeah.
Clipboards.
Yeah.
And you get done saying it, and they don't give you feedback one direction or another. You have no idea what just happened.
Not a clue.
So
not a clue.
I was doing that as an adult. I can't even imagine if it's a child who has not fully developed their brain yet.
Yeah. So to answer your question, I think that's where it came from. And I haven't talked about this a lot on the podcast, but I had a really fucked up childhood. Mm-hmm. And a lot of things contributed to my addiction that I don't think my childhood acting like played into that. But looking at the industry as a whole, like there is a stereotype around the Disney star driving the car on the wrong side of the highway on the 210 and going head on like that.
Well, it's kind of like they put you in a box, but you are still who you are, regardless of what they want from you.
Exactly.
So it feels maybe the drugs is like a way for you to like, because you see that in the industry as a whole with like younger people, not even just like Disney kids. Like think about the first album that someone like a Christina or a Britney Spears put out. Then when they put out another album, it gets like a little like raunchy. They're trying to be, because you're always going to be looked at like a kid.
Yeah.
And then you're an adult. You're like, I'm an adult, so maybe there's some acting out. It's just not good. It's just not good.
Yeah.
For a child child's brain.
Yeah, and like a show recently came out on Netflix that kind of exposed the whole industry, and I'm blanking on the name of it. It was like all trending on social media. Mm-hmm. It's an interesting world that I think for a long time everyone kind of knew it was weird, but didn't really want to talk about it because they're like, oh, I really liked that show with Lindsay Lohan, or I really liked that music from Britney Spears. So they're like, it's fine, right? Like, they're fine. Let's just not talk about it.
Yeah.
And then this show, I don't know why I can't think of the name of it.
I've seen pretty much any documentary.
Yeah.
I think maybe the way that's connected to social media as well is people have a version of you in their brain. And if you don't match that version, it becomes a problem.
They don't want to believe
it. They don't want to believe it. They want to believe you are what worked for them instead of just accepting you as you are.
Yeah. So, pulling away from, talk of childhood acting.
But the celebrity.
No, far from it. Childhood acting was, it served its purpose.
Yeah.
As much bad that it did, it also did teach me a lot. It taught me, I think from a young age, work ethic, which at 9 years old, maybe you shouldn't be learning work ethic, but it did. And I think it grew some hair on my chest to...
I'm just still there?
Yeah. I think it grew some hair on my chest to, as I became an adult, learn grit and like powering through. And the other thing that it allowed me to do, which I'm still not perfect with today, is rejection. Ooh. Which is another interesting topic, because that's all acting is. You shoot a lot of darts in acting until you're at the point that you're, some massive Hollywood star where they're reaching out to you for roles. Mm-hmm. It's all throwing darts. You're going to every single audition that your manager or your agent says, hey, there's this role, we think you fit it, you need to go to this. And you're like 98% of the time you're getting rejected.
It's humbling. It's so humbling.
Yeah. And you're sitting there in front of, like we were saying, these casting directors that are in this dark room all the way across from you, and thanks, have a great day. And you're like, what?
How'd it go? No idea.
Yeah. So what was that like for you in the beginning of your content creation career? What was that? Did you feel those feelings of rejection or feel that you didn't have a place?
No, because when I started, nobody did it.
Yeah.
Like YouTube was 6 months old when I made my first video or when I made my channel. And it was just, you had to be comfortable. That's where I got comfortable with failure, is because a lot of the stuff that people do now to help grow their channels, those are strategies we just invented because we didn't have anyone before us to teach us.
Yeah.
So like back then, it was really like a community, because it was like, I was in the top 20 of all the channels at that point in time. But to be in the top 100, you needed like 10,000 subscribers.
Wow.
Now that number's like, I don't know, probably 80 million.
Yeah.
And it's major corporations. So you didn't think that far. You didn't think about like, what is this going to be? Because Google hadn't bought it yet. You didn't make money.
Yeah.
It was just a bunch of weirdos making content, whatever they wanted, just talking heads. Or, I was doing like pentatonics. Do you know what pentatonics is?
No.
They do a cappella music. I was doing like that. I was just enjoying it.
Yeah.
And then when money gets involved, that's when things kind of shift.
For sure.
And you have to money can really mess up how you view things. When you start thinking too much about money or other people while you're making it, it's not that I don't care what people think, but what people think is kind of the last thing I think about. Because I make it because that's what I believe in.
Yeah.
So I always say I shifted from being the bee to being the flower. Instead of buzzing around trying to get pollen from all these flowers, I just became fragrant. And I attracted the bees instead.
I like that.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of metaphors.
I love metaphor, obviously,
Yeah.
I talk about that in my newsletter. And something you were talking about that I think would be relevant, that, you say you talk to people and you absorb. I wrote a whole newsletter talking about going from empathy to compassion. Empathy is, someone's drowning, I'm going to jump in that water with you.
Yeah.
Now we're both drowning. But you don't feel alone.
Yeah.
Compassion is, that's an awful situation, and I'm here to help you out of it when you're ready.
Yeah.
So that still allows you to have empathy for that person, but not absorb it, because if you absorb it, then you're less effective in helping them.
Also love that.
Yeah. I speak in nuggets apparently, so.
Yeah. You're good. You're very good with the metaphors.
Yeah.
I find that often in this world of especially mental health and addiction in particular. You talked about your TED Talk. There is a TED Talk by an individual, Johan Hari, and I've mentioned this before. He's giving this incredible talk about addiction and his years and years and years of research into the addict's brain and all these things. And then he pauses, and right before the end, it's literally his last line, the whole crowd is silent. He says, the opposite of addiction is connection. And that line has ripped across the world.
Explain it.
So if you look at addiction as a whole, you look at mental health, and you look at what's worked over history, there's a reason why people go to AA meetings, because
Community.
It works, and it's community. And community and connection are honestly the only thing, if you look at history, that has worked with an addict or an alcoholic. There's no magic pill. There's no magic therapy. You look at a rehab is simply connection. It is locking you in a space with a bunch of other people that are dealing with the exact same thing, and you go to groups throughout the day where all of those people are sharing about the issues that they've had in addiction with a licensed therapist that guides the conversation. So that idea of the opposite of addiction is connection that is what my entire world is based around. And
it reminds me of there's a Brene Brown quote that's similar. It says the opposite of fitting in is belonging.
Yep.
Because belonging doesn't require you to change anything.
Yep.
Fitting in requires you to change yourself.
Fitting into those places.
You kind of mold yourself to that spot instead of just being in that spot and being accepted as is.
Yeah. Like you were saying earlier, creating your own place rather than going to other people's places. Yeah. You belong in your own place, and other people can belong too. Other people can come into that space and belong. Yeah. But me changing myself, my worldviews, maybe my morals, the way that I think, so that I can be in somebody else's place, that's not the place I want to be in.
When you're working with those therapists, is there like a large aspect of accountability as well that's involved?
Oh my God. That is the biggest thing in especially rehabs. They use that phrase 500 times a day, is accountability. And, your accountability buddy, and, it's a silly thing, but what worked for me in the program that I went to in Maine, that I was lucky enough to go back and speak at last week, that's what it's all based around. The owner of that program, Patrick Babcock, started the program going completely against the grain. He started this program and everyone in the industry was like, what are you doing? Like, there's no science or anything behind this. This is crazy. Like, stop doing this.
Yeah.
You're teaching young people bad habits, and it worked because he knew it would work, because it worked for him and it worked for the people that taught him the method of locking an addict up, putting someone in a space where they don't have access to the world around them. That only works when they're locked up, because when they leave that place after 30, 60, 90 days, whatever, they don't have the skills to go out every single corner. We could throw a baseball and hit a liquor store here. There's someone in this park selling drugs, for sure. Like, that's the world that we live in. So he created this community and extended care. The name of the program is Foundation House, and you go there after you're kind of in a more lockdown sort of facility. Once you've gone through your withdrawals, you've been with doctors that are like monitoring you so you don't, have a seizure and die or withdrawal symptoms get too severe. He created this space where you have a ton of freedom. You basically, there's a few rules in the house. Don't be an asshole.
Which is I think a rule that should just exist everywhere.
Yeah. Don't be an asshole. Be accountable. And when you're accountable, that also means be accountable for the guys that you're living with. So that was a weird thing for me, where I came into this program and I was like, wait, I can leave? Like, there's a liquor store right there. And he's like, yeah, there is. You want to go drink? Then go drink.
Yeah.
And I realized that I was there for a month, and then 2 months, and then 2 months stacked into 19 months that I'm living in this program. But I was living my life. I had a job, but I had all these guys around me that were keeping me accountable, and they were looking out for me. And I felt this community that I had never felt before, where I was like, whoa, these people like actually care about me, and I'm not walking across the street to the liquor store because I know that John Doe in the house with me, that would break his heart, and he is looking out for me, and he would pull me away from the liquor store. So, it all comes back to that idea. It's literally one word, and it's community.
And people who care about you.
Yeah. And you've created a community, and there's people that you've never met that actually care about you. People that absorb your content.
Yeah.
That you'll never know what they're thinking. You'll never be able to stand across from them, but they care about you. And they would be deeply saddened if maybe you stop making content or something happened to you. There's this, goes back to that idea of, we're just throwing darts or the fishing line into the pond, and we don't know what's going to hit, and we never know the impact that we're making. But it is, in a way, a special feeling to know that people are absorbing our content and they're getting something out of it and feeling value and care for us. And I do feel that community.
Yeah. It's about how dark can we get on here?
Oh man, and really, really, really dark.
Ooh. I have never talked publicly about this, so that's what my reaction was right there. It's tough. 4 years ago, I tried to take my life. Luckily, the audience that I had built could see what was going on. And one of them is a psychotherapist. I have a lot of mental health professionals in my community, which makes me feel like I'm on the right track if I have their validation.
Yeah, for sure.
And I had never thought about doing that before, and I was on the phone with him for 5 hours, him trying to talk me out of it. And I don't want to go too far into like the reasons, but it had to do with the opinions of others. And I wanted so badly to be accepted by people that instead of focusing on all of the wonderful people that were around me, I focused on the minute group of people who had a problem with me, to the point where I was like, that I didn't want to be on earth anymore. And as awful as that situation was, and lots of therapy later, I'm so glad that it happened, because it was a wake-up call. It was a wake-up call to how much value I put into the opinions of others. My validation, and this is one of the struggles with a lot of people who create content, but just in general, is you got to like yourself first. And if other people like you too, cool, but you have to know who you are first.
Yeah.
So now when that happens, because, you make content online, you're going to piss people off, especially if you're talking about anything important. When I hear things that are negative,
for sure,
instead of instead of immediately absorbing that as truth and needing to change myself, I look at what I know about me.
Yeah.
And I ask myself if people who truly know me have said those things. And then I go talk to them, because we all have blind spots.
For sure.
We all have things that we need to improve upon. We all have behaviors that might be harmful to others. And I always want to improve on that.
Yeah.
But never let the opinions of other people cause you to spiral to the point where you don't want to be here anymore. And that was probably the biggest lesson from that. And it's been freedom. It's been a slow process of like weaning myself away from a lot of those people-pleasing behaviors. But man, I wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
I think about all the things that are happening in my life now that are wonderful. I wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
Because why? Because a handful of people decided they didn't like me? What was that? Here's another metaphor. You could be the juiciest peach in the world, and there's people who don't like peaches. You know? And especially if you're challenging ideas, people don't like being challenged.
No, they do not.
I get it. So they'll attack that. And that's another lesson from my therapist. He was like, when you have divergent thinking from the group.
Yeah.
Like he always pulls out his little whiteboard and like does little drawings. And he was like, he drew like all these circles, and all the circles were connected, and all the circles were different people in that group.
Yeah.
And then he drew red around mine. That was me thinking different than the group. The group it's kind of like a thermostat.
Yeah.
If I'm turning up the heat, they're going to heap cool air on that to try and bring it back to the homeostasis of that group.
Yeah.
But you could get ousted from that group, which happens.
Yeah.
But if you really believe in what you're talking about and you can stay the course, then the group has to adjust the way you think instead of you constantly having to change for them. You know, if you're constantly surrounded by people who don't think the way that you do at all and will attack you for it, maybe not the best group to be around.
Yeah.
You know, but don't be afraid to use your voice just because people might not like it. People don't like change. A lot of people are Dairy Queen. I don't blame them for it. Because therapy's hard.
Therapy's very hard.
It's really hard. Have you done EMDR therapy?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I started with EMDR therapy.
Yeah.
And I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And I got done with the first session and I was like, I'll just go back and like create some content. And I was a zombie.
Yeah.
So I had my post EMDR session s'mores.
Amazing.
You have to like have your thing that's gonna like, okay, I am a disaster, but I can look forward to that.
Yeah.
And also don't try to go straight back to work if you can avoid it, because it just drudges everything up that you've been pushing down. And it's
Yeah, EMDR is wild, and I just want to say thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I realized I just told that story and then immediately transitioned. Welcome to Conversations with me.
Yeah, I appreciate, being vulnerable. I've talked about a lot of things on this podcast that I've found that vulnerability it's good. Talking about these things with people are truly what have saved me.
That's what creates connection.
Yeah.
Because if they only see the mask, then they never see you.
Yeah.
And people know. People are smart. They can tell when you're full of it.
Yeah.
That's why I tell people, be who you are, because they'll know eventually. You will fail.
Yeah.
Some people are really good at it. We both know that.
Yeah.
But I can't fight that like inner, it's like cancer. It feels like cancer when I'm not being myself.
Yeah.
It's like eats at me.
Yeah. For years and years and years, that's all I did. It was only people pleasing and finding the right crowds to be in, and it was never being the authentic me, because I was scared. I was scared of the authentic me. I thought the authentic me was the version of myself that everyone was going to dislike. And I quickly found out, not quickly, it took many years actually, but I found out that version of me is the worst version of me. And that actually no one likes that, Austin.
Yeah.
And the second that I started being myself, it's like, whoa, people actually want to be around me and people enjoy my company, which was a interesting thing. And like you said, there's always going to be that group of people
Yes.
that don't like us.
you became the flower.
Yeah. Bring it in.
You did it.
Yeah.
You know, and it's hard work.
Yeah.
Because it's insecure.
So insecure.
Well, the vulnerability opens you up to a lot of pain.
Yeah.
So like I always say that if you are giving a version that will be acceptable to people, that version insulates you from them. So if they dislike that version, well, they don't dislike you.
Yeah.
They dislike that version. But if you're out there raw to the world and they dislike that, well, then they just dislike you. But it's not personal.
It's not.
It's not. Most people, like, well, they're going to think this about me. They're going to think that about me. Most people aren't thinking about you at all.
No.
That personalization is hard work.
Oh,
Getting rid of that
my
goodness.
goodness.
It's brutal.
Oh, my goodness. So, there's something that we do in what we call, we use the term the halls, but in the halls of Alcoholics Anonymous, there's something that happens at the end of a meeting, and we're kind of wrapping up, and they say, do you have any burning desires? Does anyone have a burning desire, something they want to get off their chest, something that they want to tell the group? So I do that on this show. I end every podcast giving my guest the opportunity to share anything, something you want to leave with the audience, a tip, something that's whatever it may be. So this is your time for a burning desire.
That's a very deep question.
Like,
This has been a lot. Okay, I still struggle with this, and I'm trying to get better at it. So maybe we can create community surrounding this.
yeah,
At the end of the day, you have to be able to look in the mirror and be happy with what you see, and it should your life's journey to figure that out. The second you get to that point where you can look and say, this person is good or good enough, you're present and you're free. You know, like I spent a lot of time, and I actually talked about it this week on my newsletter that came actually today. It came out where I was talking about taking. I actually broke up with my therapist. You know, we take breaks every once in a while, because if all you're doing is working towards this idealized version of yourself in the future, you never get to appreciate who you are now. So treat it like a professional athlete would. If you were skiing every day, all day, your body will eventually break down.
yeah,
If you're constantly going from book to book to book, podcast to podcast to podcast, you're never here. And if you zoom out and you look at, I say it a lot, you know, if you zoom out and you look, take time to appreciate all the progress, take time to rest and just enjoy who this person is.
yeah,
Because there will always be room for improvement, no matter what. But also, go live life and enjoy where you are.
yeah.
Enjoy the fruits of your labor. What's the point in working so hard if you don't ever get to enjoy it? You know?
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Oh man. I think I saw you posted a story or something around this idea today because you're a newsletter, and your content has done this to me. I've been following you for a little bit now. Your content has done this to me where wow, that is a hawk with a squirrel in its hands.
Whoa!
You should get that on camera.
I hope we got that. That's pretty cool. This is why I love being outside, because you just
Wow.
never know.
There was a whole squirrel in that hawk's hands. Oh, there's the tail. No, poor squirrel.
No, my girlfriend would hate that. She's rescued several squirrels.
Yeah,
And me.
Evolution. Sorry, audience.
No, squirrel.
That was a
That's
good
literal
moment.
squirrel. Squirrel.
Yeah, squirrel. I've had this, I think, reaction with your content and some other creators where it does make you sit and think. And when you posted this today, I was thinking about that I find myself on this ladder, and I'm constantly climbing up the ladder to future Austin, the Austin that has a massive following, in the bigger house and the nicer car and the better everything. You're always chasing that future version, and like you said, you just zoom out a little bit and you're like, whoa,
Right.
right now, this present moment, this is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
We connected through this weird social media platform, and now we're sitting in a park in Denver, Colorado, talking about things that we think are important for people to hear.
Yes.
Like, that's pretty fucking cool.
And I'm somebody who reached a lot of the goals that you're talking about, and the second I reached them, you know, I had a certain car, certain place, certain amount of income, I was like, oh, this wasn't it.
Yeah.
That was the wake up. Like, I spent also check in to see if your goals actually still align with who you are.
Yeah.
But like, I got to those things and I was like, oh, I'm still alone and miserable, and I just let everything fall apart. You gotta fall apart sometimes.
Yeah.
You gotta. It's one of the first newsletters because I've been doing it for about a year now. I was like, in order to, like, if you're in a lake, in order for you dredge up the mud that's at the bottom of the lake, what do you have to do in order to be able to see through the lake again? Stop moving. You gotta stop moving to get clarity.
Yeah.
And that is what I realized. And it's so insecure because I spent all this time building this. Thank you. I spent all this time building up all of this stuff. It's all going to fall apart. No, it's not. It's not going to fall apart. Do what's best for you in that moment. Allow yourself some clarity. Check in with who you are now.
Yep.
And appreciate who you are now. Austin now is dope.
Yeah.
Austin in the future will hopefully also be dope. But you also might not ever become that idealized version.
Yeah.
So,
what's the point in chasing it constantly?
you know,
Drives you crazy.
chase improvement. Don't chase an ideal.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, it was an absolute pleasure hosting you
fun.
today. Like I said, the World Wide Web connected us.
Yep.
And we find ourselves in Denver. And I know that the audience from Falling Off the Floor is going to connect with this the way that they do with your content. And yeah, thank you for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
I loved the chat. This was awesome.
Yeah. Falling Off the Floor episode with Chris Thompson. We are out. Thanks.